Hey everybody, Tim Albrecht here, and thank you for listening to the YFP podcast, where each week we strive to inspire and encourage you on your path towards achieving financial freedom. This week I had a chance to sit down with YFP Co-Founder, Co-Owner, and Director of Financial Planning, Tim Baker, to talk through Social Security retirement benefits. During the interview, Tim and I discussed the history of Social Security, how it came to be, and what it was and was not intended to do, how the benefits are funded. We also discuss what number of credits is needed to be eligible for benefits and how those credits are determined. And finally, how the amount of benefit paid out is determined and considerations for when one elects to receive their benefits. Now, before we jump into today's show, let's pause to acknowledge that we are in the midst of tax season. Those tax forms are piling up, and it's time to have your tax filing and planning top of mind. Now, tax strategy and planning is an undervalued but very important part of the financial plan, and YFP Tax is working hard to help pharmacy professionals optimize their tax situation. YFP Tax is opening up its services to file 2021 taxes for 125 pharmacist households this year. The team at YFP Tax isn't focused on just completing your tax return. Instead, they provide value, care, and attention to you and your taxes. Because YFP Tax works specifically with pharmacists, they are familiar with aspects of your financial plan that have an impact on your taxes. The 125 slots are filling up quickly, so don't wait too long. If you're interested in working with a team of highly trained tax professionals, head on over to yourfinancialpharmacist.com/tax to sign up. Again, that's yourfinancialpharmacist.com/tax. Tim, welcome back to the show.
Yeah, good to be back. Love these deep dives, these full episodes.
Good stuff. Looking forward to doing more of that in 2022. And we're now 240 plus episodes into the podcast. I think we've laid a really good foundation on so many topics that are front of mind for pharmacists and those in the YFP community. And I think we're itching to really take it to the next level. And today we're going to do that by providing a primer on Social Security benefits and what pharmacists should be thinking about in terms of how Social Security benefits fit into the broader financial plan. And on future episodes, we're going to discuss some common Social Security mistakes and strategies. So today we'll make sure to establish a good foundation that we can build upon going forward. So whether you're listening and you're approaching retirement, in the middle of your career, or just getting started, our hope is that you'll walk away with a Social Security nugget or two that you can consider and evaluate as a part of your own plan. And today, as we talk about Social Security benefits, we're going to use that term interchangeably with Social Security retirement benefits. So we're not going to be including and discussing the Social Security disability benefits. Tim, I was looking at a recent Wall Street Journal article, and I know you've got some other stats as well that we'll drop throughout the episode, but that article, which we'll link to in the show notes, references some work that was done by Boston College's Center for Retirement Research. And they say that for the typical American household age 55 to 64, the present value of Social Security is going to represent about 60% of their retirement assets. And, with that in mind, even if that number is half, let's say 30% for those that are listening to the podcast because they've been diligent in setting up their own savings plan, why aren't we talking more about such a big part of one's retirement assets?
Yeah, and it's crazy, Tim, because there is the tenor out there that Social Security won't be there for me in the future.
Yeah,
I can't trust it. I'm gonna have to go, do this all myself, and I don't think that's necessarily true. I think that Social Security will be a program that will endure, and it might take tweaks and in pushing full retirement age out and payroll taxes and things like that. So I think there could be things that happen along the way that make it more enduring. I think that for that for that system to fold, that would be catastrophic, because to your point in your stat, so many people rely on this for their ability to survive in later later stages of life. I read a stat that a third of retirees, 90% of their income comes from Social Security. Think about that.
Wow.
And I think it goes to show is we're not great at kind of transporting ourselves into the future and saying hey, really could use this nest egg of dollars, because we just disassociate ourselves from things that are 20, 30, 40 years out. And, it's such a important thing to kind of break down and look at, because, it's one of those things that you wake up and you're like, all right, I'm 50, I'm 60, I'm looking at retirement, and what do I have? And it's not enough. So Social Security, and we're going to go into some of the background and everything, but it is a major piece of this Rubik's Cube that is, okay, once I stop working, how can I convert, or how can I build this retirement paycheck that I've been really, working my whole life for? So, the approach, and Social Security is going to be a big part of that. The stats support that. So how you approach Social Security is one of the most important retirement income decisions you'll make. I would say most of the retirement, one of your most important retirement decisions, not even income, because as the money goes. So, so to me, we haven't talked about this enough. And I think it's really important because it is going to be a major piece of the pie when we're breaking down, okay, we need X amount of dollars, per year. This percent's going to come from Social Security. This percent's going to come from your 401k IRA. This percent's going to come from here. So like, that's really, really important to break it down. And, I read a stat, Tim, this will blow your mind. We're talking about with some clients, the power of working longer. So the stat is that delaying retirement by 3 to 6 months is equivalent to saving 1% more for 30 years.
Wow.
That's insane. And then to break it down a little bit more, deferring retirement by 1 month is equivalent to 1% more savings for the final years of, before retirement, the 10 final years before retirement.
Yeah.
So, and what's going on here, there's lots of different variables. So like when you work longer, you're earning, and typically you're earning at the top end. And we'll talk about that with Social Security. You're making the most in your career towards the latter part of your career, but you're also not, that's one less month or year that you're digging into your 401k, 403b.
Yep.
So it's one less year that, if you live to age 90, that you're drawing on that. Social Security is a big part of that in terms of delay and deferring. So there's just a lot going on that, really is important to understand. And again, Social Security is going to be a big part of that. And that's why I'm eager to kind of dive in with you and kind of, crack the nut, so to speak, in a very important topic.
Well, thanks, Tim, for dashing my hopes of early retirement. So, no, I'm just kidding. But let's start with the history of Social Security, because I think it's important. Your comment earlier was a good one, right? I think for many of us, myself included, that it's easy to disassociate with something that's 20 to 30 years out. I think even more so, like, there's been such negative talking points around Social Security that, I think especially for us that maybe are in the early mid part of our careers, where it's kind of been not a big thing that we're thinking about, which on one hand you could argue is a blessing, because that means hopefully we're building our own retirement paycheck and Social Security might be a bonus. But on the other hand, I think as we're going to expose today, that probably means we're not thinking enough about it.
Right.
You mentioned it's an important part of the Rubik's Cube. So understanding the history and what it was intended to do and not intended to do, I think is a good segue then into understanding some of the benefits and credits and how we determine how we're going to approach the strategies for withdrawal. So talk to us about the history of Social Security, starting with the Social Security Act of 1935.
Yeah, so this was an act that was signed into law by FDR, President Franklin Delano Roosevelt, in August of 1935. And really what it was, the main effort here was it created the Social Security Administration and thus the social insurance program designed to pay retired workers at retirement, age 65 or older, and to continue throughout retirement until death. So it was really meant to kind of look at the problem of economic security for those in old age by setting up this system, which you contribute as a worker throughout the course of your career into this huge fund. And it's not, it's different. We just had a question, Tim, about I'm maxing out my 401k. What should I do from here? And in that case, when you put money into a 401k, that is your own individual account. So every dollar that you put in, again, depending on your investment selections, like you're going to get that back. And Social Security is not the same. It's a big pool that, then pays benefits as you kind of, hit those retirement ages. So you're funding it. And when you look at your pay stub, Tim, you're going to see a big line for Social Security, and you're going to see that money is coming out each paycheck and how much you've contributed for the year. but it's really meant to kind of be based on, the funding based on the payroll tax contributions that you make during the course of your working life. And I think like around this time, you got to think. I think there were lots of measures to kind of protect the worker, not just in like this, in terms of economic security, but I think even like safety and things like that. And I think the data shows is that even today, and maybe it's because of this, but we're just not great savers, so we don't think that far ahead. And Social Security kind of forces that issue. And makes, and by law makes you kind of set that money aside for that future benefit. So Social Security, from the outset, Tim, was never ever meant to meet 100% of the needs of retirees. Although, like we said in some of these stats, for some people it comes pretty darn close. And again, to me, like depending on where you're at in the income scale, if you're lower income, it could be 100%. If you're higher income, it could be a very much smaller percentage of your overall need. But it is one of those income for life that is inflation protected, which you just can't find anywhere. Even if you were to say, hey, I have a $3 million portfolio and I'm going to drop $500,000 or $1 million into an annuity that I'm going to buy, it's not going to be as good or as beneficial to you as what Social Security is going to provide. And like you said, Tim, the history, and I think this has come with like different amendments, but it was really also meant to protect, disabled workers and also, families where like the working spouse or parent died. So it is a monumental piece of legislation, and I think really paved the way for people to have a benefit that they can lean on in older age and not really work for the entirety of their life.
Tim, when you say it's inflation protected, just to clarify there for folks that are diving into some of this, perhaps for the first or second time, that's because the benefit itself is inflation adjusted, right? So I remember talking with folks this year that are drawing Social Security benefits because of where inflation's at. They saw a significant bump in that benefit heading into 2022. And to your point, that's just really, really hard to find that type of a benefit. And when you think about traditional kind of retirement planning, 401k, Roth IRAs, other types of things, you're having to account for that yourself, right? As you're building that portfolio.
Yeah, exactly. So that's why, like, when we talk about, hey, you can't just stuff the mattress full of, dollar bills and hope that, in 30 years, your purchasing power is going to be there. In Social Security, like, that's built in for you. I think it's by law. So like every year they set the COLA, the cost of living, and then they adjust the benefit accordingly. So I think recently it's been lower. I think I saw a number, it was like 1.7, but next year it'll be a lot higher because we're seeing, rates start to tick up. But like, that benefit alone, Tim, is not to be underestimated, because again, if you go out into the marketplace, either an annuity. So when I say annuity, essentially what I'm saying here is like, and that's what all that like really Social Security is in a sense, is that an annuity is you put money in either in like a lump sum over time, and then sometime in the future you annuitize it. So you basically start to draw on that benefit, and they say, okay, based on the amount of money that you put in our ability to invest in on your behalf, we think that we can pay you a benefit of $2,000 per month. So what a lot of people do is they'll take some of that nest egg, some of that defined contribution, like a 401k, and they'll peel that off. So they'll say, okay, if I need a paycheck, and we're kind of a tangent here, but I think worth going down. If I need a paycheck of $5,000 per month, and $2,000 of that's going to come from Social Security, and I know that for me to like keep the lights on, housing, food, kind of the basic necessities, I need $3,000. So basically what I would do is I have $2,000 from Social Security. I'm going to purchase an annuity that's going to give me an additional $1,000 per month. So I'm going to make up a number. I'm going to take from my portfolio $500,000 and basically buy that annuity that'll give me $1,000 per month. And there's lots of different, ways to go. You can have a joint rider or you can have a term certain. There's lots of different, ways to do this and how it's invested and things like that. But essentially what you're doing is you're creating a floor. So you're saying, for me to keep the lights on, it's $3,000 per month. Social Security is going to, cover two. I'm going to purchase the one. And then the other two is more like discretionary, where I'm going to be traveling and spoiling grandkids or that type of thing. So that's all this is. And again, that's one of the beautiful things about, so to go back to the annuity thing, for you to find that same type of inflation protection, it either doesn't exist or it's capped.
Yep.
So if we have a huge year next year from an inflation perspective and it's 4%, 5%, 6%, 7%, the annuity might say, you're capped at whatever, 3%, 3.5%.
Mm-hmm.
So then what happens in that year is that your purchasing power is diminished. So that's one of the things is like the Social Security, and it's backed by the full faith and credit of the U.S. government, the taxpayer, which you can argue, okay, that's good, but from an investment perspective, it's about as safe as you can get in the world. So yeah, that's important. This is really important to understand that in terms of the context of where those dollars and we can get in this a little bit more, but like, just like everything, we talk about this with different parts of the financial plan, Tim. This is such an emotional thing.
Yep.
And you see, we'll get into like the decision to claim, like, to claim or not to claim, when you do that, what age. It's really important to, and people stress out about like, oh, like if I wait to claim and then I die, and I don't get those dollars, like what a waste. So the other thing, Tim, to really consider in this whole conversation, and it's really so true for the rest of the financial plan, is that this is not just a ones and zeros decision. It's not just a money decision. It's very much emotional. This decision on Social Security and when to claim, when not to claim, and there's lots of different approaches out there in terms of like, total benefit of Social Security versus the break-even analysis, and the idea is like, if I wait to claim, there's so many retirees that say if I wait to claim at 70 and then I die at 75, like I left a lot of money on the table.
Yeah. And
there's a lot of different pieces of that to consider, but I think like so there's lots of like stress and uncertainty there, but I think the other thing to kind of mention in this discussion is that if I kind of invoke the example that I would say is, okay, if we're looking at a $5,000 paycheck, two's going to come from Social Security, we bought another one, that and that 3,000 total out of the 5 is kind of just what we need to keep the lights on. It's for living and food and all that kind of stuff. So the emotional part of that is palpable. It's really important to understand that, because just like there's stress and emotion around when to claim, there's also this feeling of if you don't create that floor and you're dipping into your $3 million portfolio as an example, and you're every month or every quarter or whatever it is, you're deducting from that, there's this feeling of like scarcity too.
Yeah.
So sometimes, you want a little bit of column A and a little bit from column B. So sometimes people don't create that floor because they want that investment to really like thrive. And the idea of taking a big chunk out of that to create income is scary. But from a scarcity abundance mindset, like a lot more people, either by delaying Social Security or creating that floor through Social Security and annuity, really allow that abundance to thrive. And I always joke, like I joked when we bought the motorhome, I looked over at Shay and I was like, well, we can completely crash and burn, lose our jobs, lose our house, and we can always like rely on the motorhome to like have a place to live. And I think like it's just like a microcosm of what we're talking about here. Because like a lot of people, the questions for retirement is, am I going to have enough? Like, will the money run out? Right. And that is really important when we're talking about things like Social Security and where that plays in the grand scheme of things.
So Tim, I want to come back to this decision on, when somebody takes money out and what it means to defer. And we're obviously going to come back to that in later episodes on more of the strategy side, but taking a step back into the how it works, thinking about the funding of it and the credits. You mentioned before, this is something that folks likely have already noticed on their pay stub. Tell us more about how this comes out through payroll taxes and what they can be expecting there.
Yeah. So the two main payroll taxes out there is Medicare and Social Security. So Social Security, it's basically taxed at a rate at 6.2%. And sometimes you see it together at 7.65%, which is the delta is the Medicare tax rate. So every year this changes. So the maximum Social Security contribution in 2022 is $9,114. And that's based on what's called the wage base or the taxable wage base. So for 2022, the taxable Social Security wage base is $147,000. So if you multiply that by 6.2%, that's where you get the $9,114. So what essentially that means is, in layman's term, is if I'm a pharmacist out there and I'm making $147,000, or I am Elon Musk and I'm making billions, from Social Security, you're still treated as the same. So
Same
that like
thing, yeah.
any dollars above that, is not necessarily, taxed from a Social Security perspective. So the wage base is the maximum amount of earned income that employees must pay Social Security taxes on. Now, I think Medicare is uncapped, so you'll pay a percent throughout the higher earnings, so to speak. So with the funding in mind, and again, you setting aside that those dollars, not necessarily directly for you, but for the pool that you will one day dip into.
Yep.
Basically, you're trading those dollars for credits. So as you work, you build credits, and for you to become eligible for Social Security, you need 10 years or 40 quarters, 40 credits that makes you eligible for retirement benefits. So in 2022, you earn one Social Security or Medicare credit for every $1,510 in covered earnings each year. And you must earn just over $6,040 to get the maximum 4 credits for the year. So the idea is that you're building credits, and then depending on when you actually start to draw on your benefit, you kind of convert those credits to what that benefit is. And then there's also some things called like delayed credit. So for you, me and you, Tim, and it's different depending on when you're born, but for anyone born after 1960, full retirement age for you and I and anybody born after 1960 is going to be 67 years old. For my dad, who was born in the 1940s, he's the old man in the group here, so his full retirement age is 66. But if you or I or really anybody decide to like delay retirement, so delayed retirement, the maximum you could delay it to would be 70 years old, you would receive delayed retirement credits, which are used to increase the amount of your kind of older age benefit credit. So you would earn additional dollars, and it's about 8% per year that you delay. So if my full retirement age is 67 and I decide to retire at 68, my benefit would increase by 8%, which if you think about that is very, very powerful. Not everybody gets 8% raises every year. And then the other thing that's important to just remind everyone out there is that it's inflation protected. So again, this goes back, we're going to talk about this more on a strategy perspective, but it's just very powerful in terms of how you approach this decision.
So Tim, you mentioned the delayed component. So, you mentioned 67 and essentially up to 70, depending on when somebody is born. But there's also the other side of it, right? If somebody decides to take it sooner than that, talk to us about that.
Yeah, great question. Or great point. So yeah, you're really looking at, and what we're really kind of breaking down here is like how you determine your benefits. So to back up on the credits, which, we should have mentioned, is that the credits are based on your highest 35 years of earning. So, it looks at the top 35 and it goes back to that question is that if you delay, your latter years, you're probably going to be substituting like a year where you're making 6 figures from where you made, tens of thousands because you were a resident or something like that. So yeah, that's huge. So really the 3, I guess, phases or ages are going to be kind of the early retirement for everyone at 62. But what happens is that your benefit is based on full retirement age. So you have your early retirement, you have full retirement age, FRA, and then you have delayed retirement, and that's to 70. So like for you and I, Tim, our early retirement is 62 years old, our full retirement is 67, and then our delayed retirement is 70. Now, depending on where you're at from a birthday perspective, if you were born between 1934 or 1943 and 1954, then 66 is your full retirement age, not 67.
Yep.
If you're born in 1955, it's 66 in 2 months, 1956, 66 in 4 months. I don't know why they complicate these things like this, but yeah, so that's the big change. And again, there could be legislation in the future that they're going to say, hey, Tim, like, just kidding. People are living longer. Your full retirement age is not 67, it's 68. Like that could happen. Or the earliest that you could retire, from an early retirement is 63, not 62. So it's your early for us, it's 62. It's for your full retirement for us, it's 67. And for delayed retirement, it's 70. And again, those could change in the future. But depending on how you choose to then claim. So as the example is, if you begin taking your Social Security at 62, you reduce your benefit by essentially 0.5% each month to your full retirement age. So if you take it, 24 months, 2 years, every month you're reducing it by 0.5%, which can definitely add up. So a lot of people, they'll say, hey, like my job, it's not great. Or sometimes I'm forced out of retirement. A lot of people, there's this misnomer that I'm going to control like when I retire. That's not necessarily the case. That's something like 40% of people are either forced out of their job or because of a health issue of themselves or a loved one.
Yeah.
So that's also something that kind of can, to take into consideration, but it's all based on this credit. And again, when I was prepping for this podcast, Tim, I went to mysocialsecurity.gov and I pulled up my own Social Security statement, and it outlines like eligibility and earnings. It says you have the 40 work credits to receive benefits. It kind of told me what I earned last year, but then you can click in and review your full earnings record now. And it goes back really from 2021 back to, I think for me, 1998, I earned in Social Security's eyes like $351. Mm-hmm. But eventually that number will fall off in the calculation because I'm going to have, I have 24 or 25 years of work, and those lower numbers will knock off, and then, I'll get a bit better benefit. But the cool thing to see is, I can see the dollar amount of my benefit for early, full, and delayed.
Yep.
So right now, and I can share it. So this is for me, it's saying if I retire at 62, I would be on track to earn a benefit of $1,603 per month. Mm-hmm. If I wait for 67, which is my full retirement age, it's $2,341 per month. And then if I delay it to 70, it jumps up to 2,902. And again, these are inflation protected. That's really important to understand. So that's basically the way that the credits work and how that kind of translates to a benefit. And again, it's something that I think, and we could probably have a full episode of like how people kind of mismanage this decision of hey, my brother, did it at this age, or my spouse, or, these are what people are doing in, in the workplace and X, Y, and Z. And it's really just like different parts of the financial plan. It's really important that you take a look at this very intentionally, because it can have major consequences in terms of your overall outlook for your retirement picture.
Yeah, and I like what you said earlier is that, how you approach Social Security is the most important retirement income decision you're going to make, right?
Yeah.
And again, one of the reasons we want to do this episode, followed up with other content. If folks haven't yet checked out their My Social Security account, I would encourage you to do so. It's really neat to kind of see and log in and start to dig into this deeper. You can go to ssa.gov/my account. Tim, I was looking back too at my earnings record. It's fun going back, like starting when I used to work for the family business, Albrecht's Tree Farm, back in my cashier days, working at Tops grocery store in Western New York. So fun to just see some of those earnings history and see where things are at in terms of the early, full, and delayed phases. Tim, the other thought that comes to mind, and we're not going to go down the Medicare pathway right now, but if you think about that early benefit, and you mentioned, if someone begins taking it at the age of 62, they reduce their benefit by 0.5% each month. There also then is that potential gap of age eligibility for Medicare benefits. So you've got some other considerations also with just the intersection of this and then the healthcare costs as well.
Yeah. I mean, it's so true. Like when we're talking about the financial plan, it's kind of like you can't just treat one system of the body. Yeah. Like you're looking at the entire picture. And it's so true in this kind of question as well, is that there's so many, I mean, just even you overlay the taxes and like, okay, what's the best way to build that retirement paycheck from a tax perspective? But then also, you invoke things like Medicare and, even like gifting strategies if you're trying to like minimize tax there and just things. There's just an array of questions that you have to answer. And a lot of them are really less about the numbers and more about, okay, like what does this look like for you, and so many retirees go into, retirement thinking like, hey, like I'm just so done with work and I just, but then they often return to work, sometimes because of the money, but sometimes because of like they don't have the social infrastructure to kind of carry on in terms of like having a passion or a meaningful life. Yeah. And it's so funny, some of the similarities with the different like phases of life in terms of like, okay, like what's a wealthy life for you, and answering that question in your 30s and 40s and saying, okay, like we can't just sock away money and not live today. Like we want, but there's a balance to that. But also like when you reach the end of your work in life, like what's a wealthy life to you? That question still stands. And a lot of people don't ask themselves that question, or they struggle to answer it, because for a lot of us, unfortunately, like we really define ourselves by our career, our role, or our professional roles. And it's important to slow down and ask the question of like, okay, like what do I actually want to do? What do I want to get out of my 60s, 70s, 80s and beyond, and execute to that? It's a common thread no matter where you're at in the the financial journey.
Yeah, I think this too is another good reminder, as you're talking about this range from, let's just use 62 to 70, right? So the early to then the full to the delayed benefits. Obviously, we can see the negative impact of, financially, just numerically speaking, if we pull the benefit early, whereas if we're able to delay that number goes up. And just another reminder that for folks that are able to build up those savings outside of Social Security throughout their career, you take some of that pressure off, right, of getting into those early retirement years. Tim, I know we're going to come and do a lot more in detail on some of the break-even analyses and factors that can go into that. But I know a lot of pharmacists are listening to this, and I know there's a lot of math nerds that are just, looking at some of the numbers of like, man, it seems so obvious that if you wait, you're going to have more, right? If you defer, you're going to see that benefit go up. But there's really more behind that. You start to think about, well, what is someone's health situation look like? What are other savings that they have in place? And I think that is one of those areas, and you gave and commented on this just a moment ago. This is not one of those areas you say like, my friend Joe or John is doing this, and so therefore I'm going to do that as well, right?
Yeah, no, and even with like the health stuff, there are, again, we'll get into this later, but like when you look at that and you're like, all right, well, there's like a history of like in your family where people, will pass away in their 70s or 80s or whatever, so like that might press the decision, but also sometimes, depending on what the spousal benefit is, you might even decide to delay that, because if that person has a greater benefit, the spouse takes over that benefit.
Yes,
in the surviving spouse takes it. So there's just a lot of nuance there that again, there's break even, there's the total kind of benefit, all of that analysis that goes into play here. But at the end of the day, you're really trying to manage, and plan for the unknown. And that makes it really difficult. So I think like, it goes back to just, you just want to be intentional, don't like you said, it's like, don't necessarily go through the herd mentality and have this question answered, way in advance. And sometimes there are pressures like the employment and like, your outlook on employment, like your, kind of just your overall happiness factor that really presses the issue. But at the end of the day, like what we're really trying to do is come up with a plan where, again, you're living a wealthy life and the money doesn't run out. That's, paramount.
Great stuff, Tim. So again, the hopes for this episode is we're going to lay a foundation around Social Security. We talked about some of the history of Social Security, the funding of the benefits, the credit concept, how the benefit is determined, what are the different points of beginning to draw on that benefit. We're going to come back in later episodes, talk in more depth on the strategy side, as well as some common mistakes that folks might make in Social Security. As we wrap up, I want to remind folks that we're now approaching mid-February, which means we're in the midst of tax season. Those tax forms are likely piling up on your desk. It's time to have that tax filing and planning for the year top of mind. And we're excited at YFP Tax that we're opening up our tax planning services to an additional 125 pharmacist households. So we do taxes as a part of the comprehensive financial planning. For those that are clients of YFP Planning, we're opening the doors to an additional 125 pharmacist households. Really proud of the team at YFP Tax and what they have been building. I really believe that team is not just focused on getting the return done, rather providing value, care, and attention that you and your taxes certainly deserve. Those 125 spots are filling up quickly. So don't wait too long. If you're interested in working with YFP Tax, head on over to yourfinancialpharmacist.com/tax to sign up. Again, that's yourfinancialpharmacist.com/tax. As we conclude this week's podcast, an important reminder that the content on this show is provided to you for informational purposes only and is not intended to provide and should not be relied on for investment or any other advice. Information in the podcast and corresponding materials should not be construed as a solicitation or offer to buy or sell any investment or related financial products. We urge listeners to consult with a financial advisor with respect to any investment. Furthermore, the information contained in our archived newsletters, blog posts, and podcasts is not updated and may not be accurate at the time you listen to it on the podcast. Opinions and analyses expressed herein are solely those of your financial pharmacist unless otherwise noted and constitute judgments as of the dates published. Such information may contain forward-looking statements which are not intended to be guarantees of future events. Actual results could differ materially from those anticipated in the forward-looking statements. For more information, please visit yourfinancialpharmacist.com/disclaimer. Thank you again for your support of the Your Financial Pharmacist podcast. Have a great rest of your week.